Oh, yes, so deep narrate. Welcome to the Deep Narrate podcast. Imagine for a second that you're lying on an operating table.
Oh,
The bright lights are shining down, the room is freezing cold, and you look up,
mhm.
but you don't see a familiar human face, right? No doctor in a surgical mask holding a scalpel.
Just a machine.
Exactly. You're looking up at this massive, multi-armed metal entity that moves with just like absolute silence and total precision. And it's guided by a digital brain that has literally watched millions of surgeries before it even touches your skin.
It's wild to think about, but I mean, this isn't sci-fi anymore.
No, it's really not. It's happening right now in modern operating rooms. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. Our deep dive is exploring this ultimate frontier of medicine. Like, what actually happens when artificial intelligence and robotics enter the operating room?
Right, and it's a complete redefinition of what surgery even is. We're moving away from surgery being just this purely manual skill.
Yeah.
Into surgery being a data processing event. The machine isn't just a sharp tool anymore. It's a dynamic extension of the surgeon, backed by massive computing power.
Which is fascinating, but also, terrifying for someone like me. I always look at this from the humanistic side. When I see these machines, I immediately think about patient safety, the ethics of it, and just that human touch.
Yeah, the bedside manner.
Right. The moral weight of putting a terrified, hopeful human life into the hands of a silent algorithm. What do the designers even focus on to make that safe?
Well, from an engineering mindset, those human fears, they can only be solved with really rigorous technical solutions. The real challenge is taking the absolute chaos of the human body, the biological messiness, and translating it into predictable data.
So turning blood and tissue into ones and zeros.
Exactly. How do we shrink the margin of error to basically zero? How do we build systems that act as a shield for the patient rather than, an added risk? That's the core focus for researchers right now.
Okay, so before we talk about AI making life or death decisions, we really need to step back. Let's look at the physical tools first.
The hardware.
Yeah, the hardware. We've gone from human hands holding crude tools to these hyper-precise robotic arms. Why did we have to make that leap? Like, why weren't human hands good enough anymore?
It really comes down to the mechanical limitations of the human body. Historically, open surgery was the gold standard, right? The surgeon makes a massive incision just to get their hands inside and see what they're doing.
Which is incredibly traumatic for the patient.
Hugely traumatic. You're talking about massive blood loss, torn muscles, a huge inflammatory response. Recovery took weeks and it was painful, so the natural evolution was minimally invasive surgery.
Laparoscopic surgery,
Yeah.
right. Where they just make those tiny little keyhole punctures.
Yeah, laparoscopy.
Yeah.
And in theory, for the patient, it's fantastic. Less trauma, faster recovery. But ergonomically, for the surgeon,
I'm guessing it's not great.
it was a total nightmare. When you insert a long, rigid tool through a tiny hole in the abdominal wall, that hole acts as a fulcrum.
Oh, like a seesaw.
Exactly like a seesaw. It creates what we call the fulcrum effect, or inverted movement.
Wait, so if the surgeon moves the handle on the outside to the left, the sharp end inside the patient moves to the right.
Yes, your brain literally has to rewire itself to operate in reverse for hours at a time.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. And it gets worse. The human hand has 7 degrees of freedom. We have incredible range of motion. But once you stick a straight stick through a small hole, you lose your wrist articulation.
So you can't bend or twist properly.
Right. You're suddenly reduced to just 4 degrees of freedom. Plus, the surgeon is usually staring at a flat 2D monitor across the room.
Oh, so they don't even have depth perception.
Exactly. The cognitive and physical fatigue was just immense. The surgeons were sacrificing their own bodies and mental energy to spare the patient.
Wow. I always think of it like it must be like trying to paint a really delicate masterpiece with a 2-meter-long paintbrush stuck through a keyhole while watching what you're painting on a black and white TV screen.
That is a highly accurate analogy, yeah. And that's exactly why engineers realized they needed robotics, not just to get back the abilities we lost, but to go way beyond them.
So how do the modern robots fix this?
Well, they completely dismantle those limitations. Today, the surgeon sits at a really comfortable console. They look through a dual-lens viewfinder that gives them a 3D, high-definition, magnified view.
So the depth perception is back.
Better than back. With the optical magnification, it's better than if they had their hands in an open chest cavity. And the controls. The sensors pick up the surgeon's hand movements and send them to the robotic arms.
And the robot has wrists.
tiny, fully articulated mechanical wrists inside the patient. It perfectly mimics the human hand, but in a space of just a few millimeters.
Okay, but you mentioned earlier about upgrading human precision. Because no matter how good a surgeon is, hands shake, right?
Absolutely. It's a physiological fact. Under stress, or just naturally, everyone has a slight baseline tremor. So the software steps in with tremor filtration.
It filters out the shaking.
Yeah, the algorithm sits between the human hand and the robot arm. It reads that random micro vibration and just drops it. It only transmits the intentional movements.
That is incredible.
And then you add motion scaling. This is the really mind-blowing part.
How does it work? Does it slow the movement down?
No, it scales the physical distance. So you can program the system so that the surgeon moves their hand, say, 3 centimeters on the console.
But the robotic tool only moves 1 centimeter inside the patient.
Or even 1 millimeter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It allows surgeons to operate on microscopic structures like suturing tiny blood vessels or nerves with an accuracy that human anatomy just cannot achieve on its own.
Okay, that makes sense. The mechanical precision is terrifyingly good.
Mhm.
And I've always wondered about this in traditional surgery. Doctors don't just use their eyes. They use their fingers.
Haptics.
Right, the sense of touch. They can feel a hard tumor buried in soft tissue. They can feel the pulse of an artery. And maybe most importantly, they can feel the tension on a surgical thread so they know when to stop pulling before it rips the tissue.
Yeah, tissue tension is huge.
So if you stick the surgeon behind an electronic console across the room, operating metal arms, haven't you basically amputated their sense of touch? I mean, operating without force feedback must be like trying to thread a needle while wearing thick winter gloves. You can see it, but you just can't feel it.
You've just hit on one of the most complex engineering problems in the history of medical robotics. In the early days, surgeons just had to guess.
Guess.
Yeah, they relied on visual cues, like they'd watch how much the tissue deformed on the screen and guess how hard they were pulling. But that led to mistakes, obviously. Tearing tissue because they pulled too hard.
Yikes.
Yes.
So how did engineers solve that?
With ultra-precise force feedback technology, essentially we put microscopic piezoelectric sensors on the actual metal tips of the robotic pincers.
Inside the patient.
Inside the patient. When the pincers touch a tissue, those sensors measure the exact mechanical resistance. That physical pressure is converted into electrical signals in milliseconds, sent back to the console, and tiny electromagnetic motors in the hand controls actually push back against the surgeon's fingers.
Wait, really? So if the robot pulls on something tough, the controller in the doctor's hand physically gets harder to pull?
Exactly. It creates a closed loop of sensation. They can feel the difference between squishy intestines and hard bone. They can feel the exact pop of a needle going through a blood vessel wall.
That's practically magic.
The clinical data on this is amazing. With force feedback, surgeons use up to 43% less force on the tissue.
43% less. Wow. I mean, biologically speaking, excess mechanical force causes cellular trauma, which triggers inflammation and pain. So if you cut the force in half, the body barely even registers the trauma. That explains why people go home the next day instead of spending a week in a hospital bed.
Exactly. Reducing cellular trauma is the ultimate goal.
Okay, so we've upgraded the hands. We have this perfectly stable, mechanically flawless robotic hand with digital touch. But a perfect hand is useless if the brain guiding it is tired or distracted or makes a bad call.
Humans make mistakes.
Right. So how do we upgrade the cognitive side? What happens when the operating room essentially becomes a giant data processing brain with AI?
This is where we move from mechanical enhancement to cognitive assistance. AI steps in to process the mountain of data that a human brain just can't handle in real time. The biggest leap here is computer vision.
Okay, so the camera isn't just recording video anymore.
Right. It's actually understanding what it's looking at.
But how? Inside the body, it's just this slippery, wet, red mess. There's blood, there's surgical smoke from burning tissue. How does an algorithm tell the difference between a vital artery and just like regular connective tissue?
We use convolutional neural networks, or CNNs. We don't program them with strict rules. Instead, we feed them millions of frames of surgical video where experts have manually labeled every single pixel.
Oh, so it learns by exam.
Exactly. The algorithm learns something called semantic segmentation. It picks up on visual patterns that the human eye might miss. A tiny ripple in the tissue, a subtle difference in the shade of red, the way light reflects off a bile duct versus a blood vessel.
How does it show that to the surgeon?
In real time, The system overlays dynamic colored boundaries right on the surgeon's 3D screen. It literally draws safe zones and danger zones on the fly.
So it's like an augmented reality navigation system inside the patient's stomach. Just flashing, hey, don't cut here. There's a major artery hiding behind that fat.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just the scalpel. We are building systems that manage the entire OR environment, turn-by-turn guidance for the whole surgery.
Like a GPS for the operation.
Kind of, yeah. The AI monitors the anesthesia data, the patient's core temperature, breathing rates, even the communication patterns of the surgical staff. It connects all these dots to predict clinical deterioration before a human could ever notice.
Wait, are you saying it can predict something like sepsis or hidden internal bleeding before it actually happens?
Yes. By analyzing tiny deviations over hours, the AI can flag a pattern leading to sepsis way before the patient's blood pressure crashes. The data shows that these AI interventions can reduce surgical complications by up to 30%.
30%.
And it even reduces OR turnover time by predicting logistical delays.
Okay, the numbers are undeniably impressive. But thinking about this practically, when I'm driving my car and the lane assist is beeping and the blind spot monitor is flashing, I get incredibly stressed out.
Alert fatigue.
Yes. Doesn't this risk overwhelming the surgeon? If my dashboard has too many flashing lights, I get distracted. In a life or death situation, how do designers prevent alert fatigue? You don't want the OR to turn into a noisy disco of warnings.
That's a massive focus in human systems engineering right now. The challenge isn't generating the data, it's the UI UX, the user interface and experience. The AI has to filter out the noise.
So it doesn't show everything it knows all the time.
Exactly. We use context awareness. The system knows what step of the surgery we're on. If the surgeon's scalpel is moving safely toward the target tissue, the system is dead silent. The screen is clear.
It only warns you if you're about to mess up.
Right. If the predicted path of the instrument intersects with the danger zone, then and only then does the colored boundary appear. It provides actionable, critical insights at the exact moment they are needed with zero unnecessary distraction.
That completely changes how I was picturing it. So the tech is whispering, not screaming. Okay, so we've got a hyper-precise robot and an AI assistant making sure the local surgeon doesn't make a mistake.
Yep.
Let's break the walls of the room down. What if the surgeon isn't in the room? What if they're on another continent? This brings us to telesurgery, erasing geography.
Telesurgery is basically the virtualization of surgical expertise. We're translating a surgeon's hand movements into digital packets, sending them across the globe, and having robotic arms execute them on a patient thousands of kilometers away.
Which sounds impossible. I mean, with 5G and fiber optics, how far are we actually talking in the real world?
We've seen incredible successes with surgeries performed over 20,000 kilometers away.
20,000 kilometers.
Yeah, a surgeon in Asia operating on a patient in Europe. And these aren't simple procedures. We're talking complex kidney removals or spinal surgeries where screws have to be placed into vertebrae with sub-millimeter precision.
Okay, that is both amazing and absolutely terrifying. Because, when I do a video call, there's always that awkward 2-second delay. No, you go ahead. No, you go.
Right, latency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's annoying on a podcast, but if a robotic scalpel buffers inside an artery, that is catastrophic. How do you beat the physics of data transfer?
Network latency is public enemy number one for telesurgery. The human brain can tolerate a delay of about 200 milliseconds before it feels disconnected. In these transcontinental surgeries, engineers have managed to keep average delays between 20 to 135 milliseconds.
20 milliseconds. That's faster than a literal blink of an eye.
It is. But they don't use the public internet. Telesurgery relies on dedicated point-to-point networks, and more importantly, redundant network strategies.
Redundant meaning backups.
Yeah. The system sends the same critical surgical data packets down multiple independent geographic fiber optic paths at the exact same time. If one path hits a bottleneck, the other path delivers the frame right on time.
Oh, so you never get that frozen screen.
Zero frame loss in the video feed. It feels perfectly continuous to the surgeon.
Okay, but I still have to ask the nightmare question.
No?
What happens if the Wi-Fi drops completely? Or what if there's a cyber attack, a ransomware attack mid-surgery? What is the fail-safe?
It's a completely valid fear. Engineering-wise, the systems have fail-safes. If the latency spikes above a safe limit or the connection drops entirely, the robotic arms instantly trigger electromagnetic brakes. They just freeze in place.
Okay, but the patient is still cut open on the table.
Which is why there's always a mandatory, highly trained local surgical team standing right next to the patient. If the connection fails, they are scrubbed in and ready to manually take over the surgery in a split second. Telesurgery democratizes expertise. It brings the best surgeon in the world to a remote village, but it absolutely requires massive local infrastructure to be safe.
That makes me feel a lot better. Democratizing expertise is a beautiful way to put it. But ultimately, telesurgery still relies on a human making every single move from afar.
For now, yes.
Right, because I know for some engineers, the ultimate goal isn't remote control. It's handing the control over to the machine entirely. Let's talk about the autonomy spectrum.
This is the holy grail for AI researchers. Autonomy isn't black and white, it's a shifting spectrum. First, you have the AI as an assistant, just doing overlays and warnings.
Which we talked about.
Then you have AI as a partner, where control is shared. And finally, the independent executor, where the robot performs the surgery entirely on its own.
Which sounds completely insane to me. Because, okay, programming a robot to weld a car door makes sense. The door is always the exact same size in the exact same place. But the human body is chaotic. Tissues are soft, they breathe, they shift, they bleed. How do you program an autonomous robot to deal with that?
You can't use traditional rule-based programming. You can't just write a code that says move 5 centimeters and cut.
Because the tissue might have moved.
Exactly. So the breakthrough is imitation learning.
Meaning the robot watches and copies.
Basically, engineers feed the robots hundreds of hours of surgical video, along with the kinematic data, the physical movement data from expert surgeons. The AI learns the latent space of the surgery. It learns how to hold tissue, what angle to insert a needle, how to adapt to resistance.
But what if it makes a mistake? Like if a human trainee drops a piece of tissue, they just pick it back up. Does the robot know how to improvise?
Yes, through reinforcement learning. The robot doesn't just learn the perfect path, it learns how to recover from failure. If it accidentally drops a piece of tissue, it can dynamically replan, adjust the camera, find the tissue, and pick it back up without human help.
Are there actual examples of robots doing this on real tissue?
Oh, absolutely. Robots have successfully reconnected pig intestines, which is a highly delicate suturing job, and they've even removed gallbladders entirely on their own in live animal models. They adjust to the breathing and movement of the living tissue in real time.
Okay, but obviously we aren't going to jump from human surgeons today to fully autonomous robots tomorrow. There has to be a transition.
Right, and that transition is built on something called confidence-based shared control.
Confidence-based. How does a machine have confidence?
It's a mathematical formula. The system constantly calculates its algorithmic certainty. Imagine we're in surgery, the camera view is perfectly clear, the anatomy is normal, the robot's mathematical confidence is at 99%.
So it takes over.
Yep. It takes over the tedious, repetitive stuff like suturing.
But what if a blood vessel suddenly bursts and obscures the camera with blood?
The robot's confidence drops to 0 instantly. And in a fraction of a second, it hands 100% of the control back to the human surgeon to manage the crisis.
Oh, I see. It's exactly like adaptive cruise control or lane assist in a car. On a clear, straight highway, the car basically drives itself. But the second there's heavy rain or unpredictable traffic, the car boops and tells you to grab the steering wheel.
That is the perfect analogy. We call it modular progressive autonomy. The goal isn't to replace the surgeon. It's to handle the fatiguing, repetitive tasks so the human can focus purely on complex decision-making.
That sounds great in theory. But handing the scalpel to a machine brings us to the most difficult hurdle of all. And it's not a technical problem. It's a human one. We have to talk about the ethical minefield.
Yeah, the legal and ethical risks are massive. The biggest headache for developers and lawyers right now is the black box problem.
Right, where the AI makes a decision, but even the programmers don't exactly know how it arrived at that specific conclusion.
Exactly. So imagine this scenario. The AI suggests a surgical cut, but it completely contradicts the human surgeon's intuition. The doctor, with 20 years of experience, thinks the AI is wrong.
Oh man. So if the doctor ignores the AI, does it their own way, and the patient dies, is the doctor liable for ignoring the hospital's $1,000,000 AI?
That's the question. And conversely, if the doctor follows the AI's advice against their own better judgment and the patient dies, who is to blame?
The programmer,
Mm-hmm.
the hospital, the robot itself.
There's actually a huge legal debate right now around electronic personhood. Should an autonomous AI have its own legal liability status?
That's a slippery slope.
It is. But for now, the consensus is that AI must remain a tool, not an autonomous agent bearing moral responsibility. The human is always legally responsible.
But if the human is always responsible, that puts incredible pressure on the staff.
Yeah.
I've read reports that nurses and OR staff feel like they aren't caring for patients anymore. They're just babysitting machines.
Yeah, the learning curve is steep.
And there's the fear of skill erosion, too. If AI does all the hard suturing for a decade, what happens when the power goes out? Will surgeons even know how to operate manually anymore?
It's a huge concern. Just like airline pilots relying too much on autopilot, we have to mandate hybrid training. And beyond that, we have to worry about algorithmic bias.
Because the AI is only as good as the data it was trained on.
Exactly. If an AI is trained mostly on surgical videos from specific demographics or specific body types, will it perform worse on underrepresented patients? We have to ensure the data is diverse, or we risk baking healthcare inequality right into the algorithm.
At the end of the day, when a patient is lying on that table, terrified, they want a human to look them in the eye and say, "I'm going to take care of you."
Hmm.
A machine can't carry the moral weight of a human life. It doesn't feel guilt. How do designers build empathy and trust into a cold, hard algorithm?
You can't program empathy, but you can build trust through something called explainable AI.
Explainable AI.
Yeah, systems that don't just give an instruction, but actually show the human why they are giving it, using things like saliency maps on the screen. The AI highlights the subtle tissue color change and says, I recommend not cutting here because my data shows a 92% chance of a hidden artery based on this specific visual pattern.
So it shows its work, like a math test.
Exactly. When the human understands the AI's logic, they remain in mental and moral control. They aren't blindly following orders.
It makes it a true partnership. Well, it's clear that the future of surgery isn't just about sharper blades. It's about smarter partnerships. We've gone from the pure mechanical precision of force feedback and filtering out hand tremors to AI assistants that can literally predict and prevent errors.
And we're pushing those capabilities across 5G networks and all the way to robots that can operate on their own.
All while trying to build these massive ethical boundaries to keep the technology safe and human-centric. It leaves me with one final kind of profound thought. As these robots become physically perfect at cutting and suturing, the role of the human doctor is going to fundamentally change. Maybe the surgeon of the future won't be valued for their steady hands at all. Maybe they'll be valued purely for their human empathy, their judgment, and their connection with the patient. Because when the machine does the cutting, the human is finally free to do the healing.
That's a powerful way to look at it.
Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the future of the operating room. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to follow the podcast for more deep dives into the technology shaping our world. We'll see you next time.